afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this session of the Bahamas Agile and Project Management Community. I'm so happy that you are here and that you are here on time. I said earlier that I am in South Florida today and not in the Bahamas where I'm usually located, and that we are experiencing some weather from the hurricane that's passing by, nothing too drastic. But just in case I drop off call, I've given Miss Johanna co-hosting rights so that she can readmit me and the conversation can continue. I will reconnect as soon as I can. So I'm very happy to see that you are joining us today. And I wanted to start with an icebreaker to get to know our first timers. So if this is your first time being a part of the Bahamas Agile and Project Management Community, please let us know. You can come off camera and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're joining us from, and what you expect to learn from this session with Miss Johanna.
I think you might
Hello.
have come off mute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Alberto.
Okay, Alberto is my name. I'm not joining for the first time. I'm a part of this family. Johanna is my mother, even though she abandoned me. Well, I'm from Nigeria, but currently I'm in Philadelphia.
Okay, welcome, Alberto. Good to see you again. And I know that was you the last time we had a call. You did not come on camera. And I said, I know this is Alberto, who I met in Kenya last year.
Yay!
So it's good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So is anyone else a first timer?
I'm pretty sure I've been to one before, so I don't count.
But you could tell us about yourself, Danny.
I've never been to the Bahamas, but you have some interesting speakers sometimes, so I drop in anyway. I'm in Port Orchard, Washington State in the U.S.
Okay, that's great. You need to make it a point to come to the Bahamas soon.
Sounds like a great idea.
And don't come on a cruise ship, because if somebody comes on a cruise ship, I said that doesn't count. That's not really visiting the Bahamas. That's just like passing through. So you have to come by plane, spend a few days in the hotel, get a chance to visit some restaurants. You know, call me up, tell me when you're in town. I'll come and be a personal tour guide. Just let me know.
Awesome.
So
I might take you up on that.
Yeah, it's an open invitation. I love when persons visit the Bahamas and I get to show them around the island. And I live in Nassau, by the way. That's the capital, because we do have 700 islands and keys. So don't go to the wrong island.
Oh.
Let's just make that clarification. Come to Nassau. Do we have anyone else visiting for the first time? Or even if this is not your first time, we'd love to hear where you're from. What do you think about our meetups? What do you hope to learn today?
Well, this is my second or third time. We met at a conference originally in person. So your energy is always amazing, and you always bring together some great speakers. I love how you have a global presence. I'm like Danny, I'm up here in Washington State. I live in Vancouver, and I'm an Agile coach currently for the state of California, even though it's 2 states away. So I'm loving it. And Johanna and I have gone through a workshop together, and that was really fun. And I've helped review one of her books a long time ago. And so it's always good to hear your words of wisdom and be refreshed and see what new I learn. Thanks.
Excellent.
That's great. Lori, you said you and I went to a conference together in person?
I thought I had met you, and maybe yeah, because I think I introduced you to Agile PDX. But maybe it was just through a camera.
Have you
been in the Portland area for a conference in the past few years?
Not as yet. No.
Okay, only by video for now.
Yeah, we have to fix that. We have to fix that.
Yep. And likewise, I'll extend the offer to you. I'll be your tour guide if you come down to the Vancouver area.
All right, I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Anyone else joining us for the first time?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Jason Brown. I'm from the beautiful island of I'm from Nassau, Bahamas. And it's not my first time. It's actually my fifth time being a part of this project management house conference thing. I must say that it's a very great initiative. It gives us an opportunity to learn much more about it. It gives us an opportunity to share the knowledge and experience that we have, and also to become better project managers and also to become more agile.
Thank you so much, Jason. I need to really connect with you. It's bad that we're on the same island and we've never met in person. I need to take you to lunch one day.
I appreciate that offer. As a matter of fact, I didn't know you were a member of Evangelistic Temple.
Oh, yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Communicators, good job.
Yes, and I'm the president of my Toastmasters Club at Evangelistic Temple.
Oh, great. It's great.
Yes, you could join us on Friday. I'll be back. Not this
Okay.
Friday, next Friday.
Next Friday?
Yeah,
okay,
next
appreciate
Friday.
the invite.
All right. Anyone else joining us for the first time or want to say something whilst we have our icebreaker? Jim, I've never seen you here before. Is this your first time with us, Jim?
I don't think it is my first time, although maybe. I definitely thought about coming previously. As this was mentioned, you often have interesting speakers, and so that's why I'm here. Today, I live in Portland, Oregon, and I'm a software engineer working mostly in machine learning, data engineering, that kind of stuff. And I've been involved in Agile for years and years. So happy to be here today.
It's great to have you, and please don't let this be your last time. If it is your first time, we try our endeavor best to bring you the best speakers we can find, and Miss Johanna just happens to be one of the best that we can find. And I want to share with you guys that this week we celebrated a huge milestone. Like, I'm still on a high because I love to celebrate small wins. We actually achieved 1,000 followers on meetup.com. And I've been told by some of my peers in the project management communities, even with PMI chapters, that that's a huge accomplishment because you have some PMI chapters that don't even have 25 members. So we have 1,000 followers. We're 3 years in. This June made our 3rd anniversary, and we're still going strong. I'm surprised, but I know it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a dedicated team of volunteers to keep this community of practice going. I'm very saddened when I see on Meetup that some community of practices that started a while ago, they just fall away. You know, they send out the announcement that this community of practice needs someone to take up the mantle of being the organizer, or the group is going to go away. And I feel like I want to take on that mantle, but I was like, no, you have enough on your plate. Just deal with the BAPMC, keep it strong, keep it growing, keep the community thriving, and just focus on this community of practice, because we have so many things that we want to accomplish, and we want to build a community. We want it to be a true resource for persons who come and join our meetups. We want to offer opportunities for persons to obtain training, because I don't know if you know, but I'm a professional Kanban trainer with prokanban.org. I just celebrated my 2nd year anniversary as a professional Kanban trainer. And I'm also a PMI authorized training partner. So I teach the CAPM course, exam prep course. So I'm working with my team to find very creative ways that we could provide affordable, continuous learning opportunities for our members, and also to provide opportunities where we have study groups, where we have a lot of networking activities, whether it's online or in person, and to ensure that our members are getting the most that they can from being a part of this community. We also, celebrate the fact that we're a global community. And I love to say that even though we're based in the Bahamas, we're homegrown in the Bahamas, our community is made up of members from all over the world. I think last month we had Alberto from Nigeria. We had somebody from Japan. Like, I'm surprised when I see the persons show up in a different time zone. So you would think that at 6 p.m. Eastern time, somebody from Japan would not be in our meetup. and to see that they actually stayed awake 2 o'clock in the morning to be a part of this, it says a lot. It says that we're doing something right. And it really encourages our team to keep going and to make sure that we provide value. Because first and foremost, people show up because it's valuable to them. They're getting something from it. So I thank you for taking the time to be with us. I see that Sarah is back. Kenny is also here, and also Philip. Those of our members who are consistent in joining us. And Sarah, would you like to share why you're a part of this community?
I mean, I'm just here for the fun. Really, it's just a good time.
Yeah, so that's a good part of it. You know, if you don't have fun when you're learning, something is wrong. I believe that you learn more when you have fun, and it becomes sticky. So I'm all about sticky fun. So without further ado, if no one else wants to say anything before we get started, I would get us going in a word of prayer, and then introduce our speaker and let her take over the podium and get us going in our presentation. So Heavenly Father God, thank you so much for this opportunity once again to come before you as a Bahamas Agile and Project Management community. Father God, when you placed this vision in my heart, I did not realize that it would have been such a sustainable community that has grown so widely with a global reach. Father God, I ask that you would continue to bless each and every person who joins us, every person who contributes to what we're trying to achieve. And Lord, that your mission will be met. We ask that you would continue to guide us within your will so that everything we do, say, and accomplish is will be done to your honor and glory. And I thank you so much, Father God, that this week we celebrated a milestone of 1,000 followers on Meetup. We ask that we would not only celebrate the numbers there, God, but that we would have 1,000 persons in our meetups one day. I ask that you would continue to grace us with your mercy and divine favor, that you will continue to open up your door, the doors of heaven, and pour down the blessings on each and every person that is here tonight. Lord, I thank you for your continued grace. And I ask for your continued blessings in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. So let me read Miss Johanna's intro. Johanna Rothman, known as the Pragmatic Manager, offers frank advice for your tough problems. She helps leaders and teams learn to see practical alternatives that help them achieve more agility in their work. With that knowledge, they can choose what and how to adapt their product development. With her trademark practicality and humor, Johanna is the author of 20 books about many aspects of product development, including project, program, and portfolio management. Her most recent book is Project Lifecycles: How to Reduce Risk, Release Successful Products, and Increase Agility. In addition to her Pragmatic Manager newsletter, Johanna writes 2 blogs, one on her site, jrothman.com, and a personal blog on createadaptablelife.com. Without further ado, I welcome to you, Johanna Rothman.
Thank you very much. I have to admit, I have never had the opportunity for somebody to share a little prayer before I start, and I think it's a really nice way to start a meeting. So thank you for that. I am popping out the chat so I can also see when you write anything. You nice folks write anything in the chat. Okay. All right. So let's talk about practical ways to increase your agility. And I'm going to talk about visualizing how you actually work. So you might want to take a few notes. I will be asking you questions. And every time I need to drink water, you get to also ask me questions and possibly put things in the chat. All right. So every time I talk to people, well, you should know I'm a consultant, right? So people only call me when they're having trouble. And everyone tells me they have gone agile, right? But a number of people said to me, we want our own agile approach. We want company XYZ Agile Approach, or we want product ABC Agile Approach. And when I ask them about what they're currently doing to understand why they would want this, they tell me that they need to have a lot of backlog, right? They need to have 3 quarters or 18 months worth of backlogs. They almost always have a backlog that the team cannot complete inside of an iteration. Too often, they tell me that they are not able to have a product strategy. So the teams finish a feature and then finish a feature, finish a feature. That's feature factory kind of work, which can be helpful if you're doing very small experiments and you're trying to find your product strategy, but is not so helpful 6 months in, or even 2 years in, or whenever. When they tell me they don't have time to experiment, I get really worried, because agility requires experimentation. As a result, they have a lot of late changes, and they want agile, right? Agile, so that they don't have a lot of late changes, so that everything just works. By the time we're all done, there are all these quotes about the things that they want. But the upshot is the managers are perturbed because the teams are not delivering. The teams feel no joy, no ease, and all they have is this grind of daily work. It's horrible for everyone. And when I think about the root cause, I often discover that it's the culture, and the culture is based on what managers value. So when managers value resource efficiency, that's when the work assignment comes in. It goes from one expert to the next expert. They do their work, and they then give it to the next expert, et cetera, et cetera. Every single time you have a handoff between experts, you have a delay. So the more experts you have in resource efficiency, the longer it takes for the team to finish anything, because the team is not really acting as a team, right? So this is a cultural thing. It's not because people don't want to act as a team, but if managers decide that individual actions or deliverables is what they want to see, they will reward resource efficiency. Instead, what we need in organizations is a culture of flow efficiency. That's where the work assignment comes in, and several people collaborate to finish the work. Does it have to be the entire team? Maybe not. Maybe it's a subset of the team. Maybe the team has a maximum WIP, work in progress, of 2 items, and that might mean 3 or 4 people work on this item, 3 or 4 people work on that item, but you're all working in flow efficiency. When teams can work in flow efficiency, that creates the environment where everyone can succeed and the team as a whole succeeds. And why do managers, otherwise very, very smart managers, do this where they fall into the trap of resource efficiency? Because that's how they decide on the rewards. And the more rewards are based on resource efficiency, the harder it is for agility, any kind of an agile approach, to really succeed. So I'm saying true agility cannot survive, but you have many options. And what I often hear is, should we do waterfall or agile? Well, that's not a very useful question, because every single time we make a decision about how to organize the work, we need to be thinking about risks. So I want to think about risks and think about incorporating agility based on all of those risks. So let me first talk about the various risks that you might see in your projects. I see three kinds of major risks. There are the project risks, the product risks, and the portfolio and organization risks. Because the more we manage risks, the more we can decide on the right feedback loop duration for our project in this time, right? This context requires different risks than any other context. So let me talk about how I think about project risks. A lot of managers think, well, I need to control the cost, or I need to control the work environment, and I need to control the people and their expectations. And when I do, that will allow me to define the feature set with the quality that I want and when the team can release it. That means managers are trying to define every single thing. Turns out that doesn't work. And if you've been with the PMI for a long time, you might have heard of three legs of the stool, where it was cost, schedule, or quality, or cost, schedule, or time, or time and cost and features. I mean, it was always a three-legged stool, but it's actually a pyramid. If you think about putting your hand at the middle of this pyramid and think about everything you know about projects. The more features you want, that means the more time you need. And if you want less time, you will definitely have worse quality, right? So the team is totally responsible to themselves for how they manage all of this. Because every single time any manager has said to me, oh, cost is really important, turns out cost was totally irrelevant because they always wanted more features in less time. If you want more features in less time, right, from what we know about Little's Law, we need to have more people and to manage the WIP, right, the work in progress. Because you cannot get more features in less time with fewer people. That does not work. And the more people work as individuals, as in resource efficiency, the longer everything takes. So my experience, and I have the gray hair to prove I have all of this experience, is that when managers want to impose restrictions on everything, they actually make no choices. Instead, we need to choose what one driver drives the project. It's often something in the middle. Sometimes it is the cost, but that's when a team can then say, okay, if you only want to spend $1,000 a week, we will have just 2 or 3 people. We will organize our work so we can deliver something once every 2 or 3 weeks. And when the project ends, it ends. That's often the wrong risk for the management. So one of these aspects drives your project. 2 of them, or up to 2, I should say, can constrain your project. And then all of the other risks have to float. So you can manage the risks in the context of your project as you get feedback about what's going on, right? So project risks have a huge effect on life cycle choices. So if you are driven by feature set and you want stuff fast, but feature set really matters, then you will probably have an incremental life cycle. Depending on the time, right? You might have an incremental or an iterative life cycle, but you have choices. So you need to think about which risks drive which choices. Now, then there are product risks. I have found that many of my clients think that they either have a totally deterministic project where they're doing a port from an old technology to a new technology. They think that there are no risks there. One such client discovered after the team had worked for 6 months that they uncovered all kinds of defects as they were moving from the old technology to the new technology. And the developers, the product team, actually asked management, do you want us to move all the defects over from the old technology to the new technology? And management said, no, these are the things our customers are going nutso about. So that meant they now had risks. They had to innovate as they proceeded. Now, there are some projects that are totally non-deterministic. We don't know where we're going until we get there. There are very few projects like that. However, most projects have some need for innovation. This is the messy middle. And the more innovation you need, the more you need agility in your project. The less, if you don't need any innovation, you don't need any agility. But most of us live here. And that's often because the productizers rarely survive the first contact with the customer. So you think you're totally non-deterministic, I should say deterministic. And then you release something and the customers say, hold on a second, we really need something else. Because customers, and I fully admit I am just like this, until I see what you have to offer me, I don't know what you need. And those of you who have reviewed my books or seen any of my books in progress know that I often change the content of the book after my first technical review. I get it pretty close, but I don't know what I don't know. And that's the whole point about product risks. Then there are portfolio risks. Every time, I really wish that the world did not change as much as it does. Because we could decide the portfolio once at the beginning of the year and it would stay fine for the entire year. Or just once at the beginning of a quarter and it would stay fine for the entire quarter. I have yet to see that. In fact, most of my clients now are trying to figure out, can we review the portfolio monthly or every six weeks, because our market is so much in flux. We don't have the stability for long decision times. So the more you have portfolio risks, the more often you need to release something, the more agility you need in your project. So that's all about the feedback loops. Now, one thing you'll notice, I'm not talking about agile with a capital A, and I'm talking about agile approaches, because an agile approach is not a life cycle. It's a way to possibly organize a project, but it's not a specific life cycle. When I worked on the Agile Practice Guide, this was the hardest thing I had to get across to the PMI people. They thought that Agile was a capital A and it was a life cycle. Instead, think of an Agile approach as a culture change. It's not a mindset. I have always, so many of you have known me for a long time. Danny, I can call on you and say, how long have I been trying to lose weight? The entire time you've known me, I have a mindset of losing weight. And until I changed my practices, right, I could not do it. So it's really it's really important to say, while mindset might help, it's not, an agile approach is not a mindset. It might require some specific practices, especially technical excellence. However, an agile approach is not a life cycle or a mindset. It really is a cultural change. So if you think about an agile approach, it requires a collaborative cross-functional team. They might have a ranked backlog for an iteration or a ranked backlog full of options where they take a limited amount of WIP into the team and then deliver and demo on a frequent basis. And every so often, they do a retrospective. Now, you'll notice this particular image, we can use this for Kanban or for Scrum or any other agile approach. It does not matter, right? Because the agile approach requires these items as opposed to a mindset or specific practices. So I would like you to think about agility in your projects as opposed to agile. All right. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about how to choose the life cycle, and then I will show you pictures. So the higher your organizational or product risks, the more frequent you need feedback loops. That's the incremental combination or an agile approach. And the more you have project risks of date or low defects, the more you need an incremental or agile approach. If you want more features, you probably need an iterative or an agile approach. So, and the general guidelines is if you know what to do and you have a short time frame, sure, you could use a serial or an incremental life cycle. A serial is a waterfall, I should say. A waterfall is an example of a serial life cycle. But when I talk about a serial life cycle being acceptable, I mean 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 4, right? A short time frame. And then anything longer than that is you need a different life cycle other than a serial life cycle. So one thing, agile teams always work through the architecture to deliver value. If you are working across the architecture, I have a picture in here later about component teams. Component teams tend to work across the architecture. There are ways you can sort of kind of make that work, but it's really hard. So this business of a cross-functional team working through the architecture, that's the fastest way to incorporate agility into your work. So if you have more risks than what I've discussed, that means you need to reduce the feedback loop duration. So I want to know about your collaboration to enable agility. So on the scale of 1 to 5, where 1, everyone always works alone unless there's an emergency, and 5, the team always collaborates on everything. 3, we collaborate on urgent issues. Please put a number in the chat for your, and I won't call out your names, but put a number in the chat for how you and your team tend to work now. I see a 4, another 4, a 5, a 4, yeah, 5. Oh my goodness. This is great. This is great. Wow. 4.5. That's really wonderful. You folks are, this actually makes sense. None of you have asked me for consulting. And remember, right, consultants only see when people have trouble. So I am very impressed with all of you that you are able to sometimes people work alone, which means most of the time people work together or the team collaborates on everything where nobody works alone. That's really great. Okay. So let me talk now about the life cycles. So you've heard of a waterfall. That all the serial life cycles are waterfall, stage gate phases. There's all this planning up front, and then supposedly you have a simple matter of execution. Now, when I say planning up front, that does not mean that people don't do prototypes in an analysis. Sometimes they do, and they don't do prototypes of design. Sometimes they do, but when I see a much more serial life cycle, I see organizations like that these people will not, I will not call them by name because nobody deserves that. They spent 6 weeks on requirements because they thought they needed to spend iteration 0 on requirements. Their iteration 0 was 6 weeks. Then they spent another iteration 1 on analysis, another 6 weeks. They spent another iteration, another 6 weeks on design. Right now we are up to 18 weeks. They did not start coding until all of that was done. They thought because they called all of this iterations that they were using Agile of some sort, but they were not. And the worst part was because the testers were not integrated with the developers. They did not know anything about the state of the product until the testers started to test. So this is a serial life cycle. And the problem with the serial life cycle is they get stuck in various kinds of hell. There's the requirements hell, where they start off doing requirements, and then as they go to analysis, they realize, oh, we need to change the requirements. So they go back to requirements. Same thing with design, and same thing with code, same thing with integration. They always feed back into requirements before finishing any one thing. And the longer it takes for you to finish any one thing, the longer your unplanned feedback loops are, right? So that's where you get into test and you say, oh my goodness, we have this red feedback loop back to requirements. So that's a very long feedback loop to learn. One of my clients really loves their freezes. They love requirements freeze and architecture freeze. And of course, they always keep finding more things to do. So instead of freezes, I said, what if you substitute the word slush every time you want freeze? Because you're not freezing, right? I mean, it doesn't happen. I live in Boston. I know all about slush. And they said, you know, what do you mean? We need this for our capitalization. And I said, aha, if you want capitalization, you need to at least be in testing and preferably release something. So it's all candidates and it's all slush. It's not actually capitalized. So you cannot capitalize anything until you release it in some way, shape, or form. Okay. So which means if you are doing any of this and you think you're using some kind of an agile approach, this is where the feature factories come in, where you start to do a little bit, or the water scrum fall, right? Where you do a whole lot of requirements up front, then you use iterations for the scrum, and then you do fall as in finish the testing and release something, but you're not learning as you go. Now, there are the iterative life cycles, which can be very helpful, especially if you don't actually know what the customer wants. So you can do a whole bunch of prototype refinement. Barry Beam's spiral model talked about this in, was that the 70s, 80s, whatever it is, evolutionary prototyping. SAFE is often an iterative life cycle because until you actually release something, you're getting later feedback. And the worst part is if you only have prototypes, you get very late feedback, very late in the project. I like to call this the project kiss of death, which is not a happy place for anybody to be. Then there's the internal versus external feedback part. If you can get feedback from outside the team, even if it's from inside the organization, then iterative approaches can work. Hardware teams often do this, right? So if you're thinking about hardware, how can hardware be agile? Agile in quotes. You can do this as long as you demo what's going on and the hardware people actually show their work. Back when I was taking math classes and things just made sense to me, as opposed to arithmetic, which made not very much sense to me. My teachers always used to say, show your work, Johanna. That's the point of a demo, right? Show your work, even if it's just to only the people inside the organization. However, if you are able to show work to a trusted customer, that's even better. Even if you don't actually deliver it to that customer, showing it can be very, very helpful. So then the incremental life cycles are a little bit different. I often use a time box to gather and define the requirements, then some kind of another time box to do some analysis. And then if you're using design to schedule, all of these are release candidates working on feature sets at the highest and then next priority, right? So you always do the highest ranking work first. This is because it's a release candidate, you might or might not release. Stage delivery, on the other hand, assumes you will release very frequently. Now, back when the world was young and I was too, I often used a stage delivery approach, especially for very large programs, right? The larger the program, the more teams you have, the more often you need to release. So back in the 80s, in the mid 80s, I was releasing for this program that I was a part of, we released something every month, right? If there were 30 teams or 40 teams, every single team released finished work at the end. Well, not the end. Often it was the 13th or the 14th of the month, right? The middle of the month. So it was, nobody was trying to catch up to the end or the beginning of a month. So we always released something that we often released incrementally between that time, but we always released something useful for the customers at that time. This is back when we needed CDs and tapes to go out to customers. So the cost of shipping was very high, but we could ship internally and then show people as we were delivering. That really gave us a lot of feedback. And because we ranked the feature sets, we were able to do this on a fairly regular basis. So the incremental life cycles kind of mimic the agile approaches as long as you time box the requirements and the analysis. Also, notice there is no retrospective here. And I'm talking about releasing and demoing, but there's no retrospective. So if you can only do an incremental approach, that allows you, if you tuck in a retrospective every time you deliver something, it looks a lot more like an agile approach. You have increased your agility because you're getting feedback much, much faster. Now, if you have late feedback in incremental life cycles, and you have not yet released because you only have release candidates, that's kind of tricky. You might have the project kiss of death. However, in stage delivery, you often don't have a project kiss of death because you are releasing. Now, you have not incorporated retrospectives, so you're not perfectly agile, whatever that is. But it's much more useful than not having any releasing at all. So one thing I would like you to consider is combining approaches. I find that a lot of my clients find that if they cannot really use an agile approach, they can use either a date. If you have a date-driven project, you iterate on what you do know to select an architecture and then start implementing by feature. Then you might have one release candidate or release, right? Then the alternative is do that initial passive requirements and then think about evolutionary prototyping. Make sure you have decision points in your roadmap, because every time you have a decision point, you can decide what to do next and then choose when to release. All right. So I said the component teams really have trouble because while an agile approach means you always implement through the architecture, component teams tend to work across the architecture. So the UI team works on the UI, the middleware team works in the middleware, the backend team works on the backend, and then the test team. This is the first place where we actually know if we have any kind of features at all. That's why there's this idea of check-in according to policy. The more often every team checks in, you can kind of sort of mimic collaboration. It's not really collaboration, but it's mimicking collaboration, because while the teams are still working separately, if they check in something every single day, and that something will work towards a slice through the architecture, you might be able to have something like more agile component teams. But if you have component teams, it's really, really hard to create more agility. So then the agile approaches are where as an example, you have an iterative agile approach where we have time boxes. The team limits the WIP by what they take into the time box. And the shorter the iteration, the faster everyone learns. So remember, you might not, back in the late 90s and the early O's, when Scrum was really making everybody think about Agile, and the Agile Manifesto came out, everyone said, oh, we do 4-week iterations. And too many people said, oh, that's too long. We do 3-week iterations. And of course, and then people said, well, 2-week iterations because it takes too long to plan. And I said, what's wrong with the 1-week iteration? Plan for an hour, do the work, do the demo and the retrospective at the end, and then plan for an hour. If you can't plan for an hour, if that means it's too much work. And people said, oh, Johanna, you just don't understand. Well, that's one way to actually use a Kanban system where you say, what 1, 2, or 3 things that we might want to pull into our team, depending on the number of people we have in our team and the amount of WIP that we want. We might not want to use a time box, and our features can be any size that they are. But if we limit our WIP to what we understand or what we want to experiment with, then we know what 1 or 2, maybe 3 things we have to do, and we have an options column on the board to pull work in as necessary. So you don't need time boxes to use an agile approach. For most of my clients, I almost always recommend that they use Kanban often inside iterations because it makes showing other people what you've done, right? That cadence of iterations helps other people recognize when they should be available for demo. That's fine. So let me ask about WIP limits. And in the chat, please use a number for your answer. If you can never limit WIP, if you cannot say no to anything, that's a 1. And a 5 is we always limit WIP to whatever it is you limit WIP to, and then you finish what you start before taking on new work. How are you? Please put your number in the chat. I see a 4. Okay, never really grokked WIP. Okay. 3, 4. Your urgent work is really, really a problem. So is production support. Are there numbers? Okay, so if you have urgent work or production support, that often means, let me rephrase it. That might mean you have not finished everything you thought was done. Oh, and 2, because the shortcuts, it's not live in production. Yeah. If you are too often taking shortcuts or not focusing on technical excellence to know you have really finished, that means you might have urgent work or production support. However, there are several ways to manage this. And that's one really great way is to collaborate on every single thing that the team does and not to worry about wasting time for people, but to really think about working in flow efficiency where the entire team focuses on a limited amount of work. If you have urgent work or shortcuts or production support, start really working as either a swarm or a mob. I guess a lot more people really like to call mobbing ensemble work. To me, ensemble really means individuals. So I don't happen to like that name, but that's me. So think about, and I can offer you some posts that I've written about that. So if you limit the amount of work that the team is supposed to do, and then really finish it, finish, that, and learn from what you did or did not finish. If something else pops up again, then you might be able to really understand how to limit WIP. So let me talk about how to increase agility. So if you focus on, well, first there are team tips. If you focus on the flow of work, not what individual people do, that can really help you increase agility. By that one thing will limit your WIP, and that makes all the difference in the world. Also, make sure you reduce any upfront work, because the longer you do upfront work, the longer your feedback loops are. And that means you're not managing all those project and product and portfolio risks. I was surprised that I still needed to talk about this. One of my clients is still moving people around in projects. I'm sure, I hope that none of you have this particular problem where you're supposed to be on 2 Scrum teams and then you're supposed to go to the stand-ups, and the stand-ups are always an hour. I mean, those are all horrible things, right? So the way you deal with that, if you are the Scrum Master or an Agile Project Manager or some other title-based authority, say to your managers, I realize we need all these people. However, I'm only getting them half time. And because I'm not even getting them half time because of the multitasking, I really need more people. So either we should help this other team or they should help us. right? We don't need 2 Scrum Masters. We don't need 2 Agile project managers. We don't need 2 of us. We need one team to really collaborate on everything this one team needs to do, and then focus on the flow of work and reduce the WIP. That's how you can make this work. Is anyone not familiar with flow metrics? When I say flow metrics, is that a concern to people? No? Okay. So I really like to use Little's Law, where I say, you know how our cycle time seems to be too long and our throughput is too low? That's because we have all this work in progress. So when I don't measure velocity, I used to measure the number of stories per iteration, right? Not story points, stories, completed stories. Now I measure cycle time. How long does it take us to finish something? The aging, to see where the work gets stuck. The WIP is how much work is in progress, and the throughput. And if you understand Little's Law, that's all about why your collaboration and ability to limit WIP matter. So if you are trying to use more traditional Agile metrics, throw those out. Just focus on the flow metrics. Now, if you have to use Jira, that means you have to change your board, because you can only measure flow metrics in Jira, at least the last I knew, if you are using a Kanban board. Don't get me started on tools that really do not help teams finish the work. So think about your flow metrics and think about how you can use them to make the work happen much more regularly. The more you can right-size the stories and the more you can think about your cycle time and reducing WIP, the more regular you are at delivering something useful. That reduces your feedback loop time, which makes it possible for your project to succeed. Then there are the culture and project tips. So I really like to figure out how often can we, when do we need feedback? Do we need feedback every single day? Probably not. Do we need feedback at least once a month? Maybe. Do we need feedback once every week or two? Probably, right? This goes back to the innovation risks. The more often you need feedback, then the more you might want to plan for shorter projects. So several years ago, I was coaching a project manager who said, my projects, I start off with a 9-month project and it gets to be 12 months and then 15 months and then 18 months. I'm afraid to see what it's like now. I said, oh, have I got a tip for you? Declare a victory and end the project. She said, what? We haven't finished. I said, well, you're not going to finish. Declare a victory and end version 1. Now start the next version. And if you do this only with 3 to 6 month projects, you won't have to plan for 3 or 4 months before you start. So if you take that 9-month project and say, we're not going to plan for 3 months, we're only going to plan for 6 months at a time, maybe 4 months, right? The more you reduce the overall duration of the project, the more agility you can create. And the more you demo and deliver, or deliver and demo, depending on how you do it, the more often you learn from your feedback loops. You can decide what you're not going to include in the next version, or what you don't have to do any more work on. It becomes a system that's self-fulfilling, and the more you limit the work, limit the WIP, the easier it is. So yes, the less planning you can do and the more delivering, that's how you get real agility. So it's all about the customers, right? Well, nobody cares about Agile, right? No, there is no manager who really cares about Agile, but they want agility because they want to satisfy the customer. They want you to manage the risks to release, and they want to obtain revenue. So your managers want agility. And you can do this with any number of possibilities, even if you cannot create a true Agile culture. I really like joy and ease in my work, and that's why I want to incorporate agility. So that's the end of my formal remarks. I have a bunch of books, the Pragmatic Manager newsletter, all kinds of good stuff. And I'm going to stop the share so I can actually see your smiling faces and the chat. Okay. And Andrea, if you are here, you can stop highlighting me. That would be fine. So yes. So the idea is, Lori is correct. Woody Zuhl is now talking about mobbing as software teaming. So there are at least two kinds of software teaming. There's swarming, where everybody works to their own expertise, and they might separate and then come back together. Let me find my pairing. Swarming. Yeah. I have a post about this that you might find very helpful. And yeah, I'm disappointed that you don't like mob, because I think of it as a flash mob. So, but it's not flash.
Yeah.
And
I just never thought of it that way. So yeah.
Yeah, but that's okay. So there's swarming and there's mobbing, and I think it's really important to say what will work for us. And then for some of you said, I don't quite grok why WIP is an issue. I'm going to put in the chat this newsletter that I wrote earlier this year. And the real key is how everything intersects. So if you page down to that one, there I have a picture that says if you have an increase in WIP in the work in progress, then you have increasing cycle time. It takes longer to release something. That leads to lower throughput. So instead of a cycle time of maybe a week, now you have a cycle time of 2 weeks, right? And you only release half a thing per week, which makes no sense. The worst part is all of those things get old, and the older everything gets, the less relevant and useful it might be, right? Aging is something we don't talk enough about, and aging in a backlog is even much, much worse, because we put stuff in the backlog, 3 months, 6 months ago, 6 years. That stuff is no longer useful. I guarantee it. I have when my husband and I moved to this house, we had the drawer in the kitchen with the our children were in their 20s at that time, with the children's bibs and plastic plates, all that stuff, right? The stuff you have when you have young children, and our children were in their 20s. I said, we can give all this stuff away. Although I picked up a bib and it came apart in my hands, and I said, maybe we throw this one out. And he said, oh, no, we have to keep that for the grandchildren. I said, our children don't have boyfriends. They're not even close to getting married. And they are, even if they do things out of order, we're not going to have grandchildren for a while. So we had grandchildren about 8 years later, and I said to my husband, so we moved a box that said for the grandchildren into the basement. You know where that box is. That box is in the basement. We're not ever going to give all that stuff to our grandchildren. That stuff is for my husband, right? Because he's a wonderful human. He really does not like to get rid of things. Whereas, aside from books, I get rid of things all the time. So I think it's really important to say, what purpose does this thing hold? And the more aging you have, the more width you have. All right. So other questions?
Well, I dropped a question in the chat earlier. I don't know if you probably didn't see it. I was asking if you could go a bit deeper into what are some of the early warning signs that an organization is falling into the trap of fake agility, and how can leaders identify these before they become ingrained in the culture?
So I'm going to turn that around a little bit, because the more an organization does performance management and assume that they call people individual contributors and they want to identify who solved that problem and who did all this wonderful work, they are stuck in the trap of fake agility. They are stuck right there. Because we want agility really requires a culture of flow efficiency where team members collaborate. So maybe one way to answer that question is to say, if you want real agility, how much collaboration can you build into your work? Right? Are people disincented from collaborating? And that might be one way to see it, because I find that so every organization has to report their numbers via cost accounting. Cost accounting reinforces resource efficiency, because you think you understand what Johanna contributed, or Andrea contributed, or Sarah contributed. But in a well-functioning team, yeah, we might be able to point to a little bit that one of us did, but chances are very good we all participated in some way, right? So I have had to really work on my facilitation skills. And back when I was a developer, I think we could say, yeah, I didn't have many. So, but I now have excellent facilitation skills, and I think it would be really hard for people to say, if I use my facilitation skills, does that mean I am not contributing? No, we are. So I think it's anytime we do resource efficiency and think we understand the contributions of any one person, we probably do not. That's a really common way for managers to fall into this trap.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Hi, Joanna.
Hi, Philip.
Yeah, good. Nice one. So I just want to ask you a question. I understand that agility has to do with speed. Yeah. So my question is, how can an agile team balance to balance the need for speed and also quality? So, and what are like the visualization techniques that they can apply to balance that need for between speed and quality? How can they manage speed and quality? And then what are the visualization tools that they can use to also balance that need for speed and quality too?
So I often find that if we want to go faster, we really need to leave things clean. That the more quality we build in, the faster we can go. So I write a lot, and I never write anything that's there's a term in writing called, excuse me, a shitty first draft, where you're supposed to vomit words onto the page. Now, I don't like that, right? Anne Lamott created that phrase. I think it's terrible. Why would I want to talk about my writing that way? Well, a lot of too many developers think that if they just get it down, they can fix it later. That's actually the hardest way to fix things, because we always miss what we are blind to our own defects. I excelled at missing all of my defects back when I was programming, which is why I have trained myself as a writer to write clean. So I don't assume I'm going to be able to go back and fix anything. I will make sure I will cycle through this area of my book or my blog post until I get it right. And if I need feedback on it because I'm not getting it, somehow it's not gelling for me, then I will ask people. I will say, I had trouble with this. Maybe you can help me. When you read this, what does it say to you? And I find that it's the same with programming, right? The same with product development. The more we incorporate technical excellence and finishing as we proceed, the faster we go. So if you have unit tests, I'm now a very big proponent of TDD or BDD or anything that allows us to incorporate design as we go instead of coding after design, because they're all about thinking about the design of the product, not the tests that actually the product needs. We do it with tests, but it's all about the design. That allows me to work from the back of the life cycle towards the front, right? So we are not trying to design something when we know the least about the problem. Instead, we are saying if we use tests, we can create the design as we go. And I find that really helps me understand what it is I'm doing. So the more technical excellence we can create as we go, the faster we go. We don't have to go back and fix anything. We might have to change things, but we don't have to fix them. Did that make sense?
Very well. Yeah. Very well. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I also have questions. They're somewhere. Well, they're in several of my books. I often ask the senior managers if it's 3 weeks before we want to ship this product and we don't have all the features and we have too many defects and it's we're not going to make the date. What decision will you make 3 weeks before we want to ship? And if they say ship anyway, we know it's the date that's driving the project. And if they say clean up everything, because we have to clean up everything, then we know that quality is driving the project. And if they say, oh, no, you got to finish those features, then we know features are driving, right? So if we know what one thing is driving the project, now we can decide what else to do. Oh, Danny, yes, XP. We need XP. I mean, XP are the technical practices, and it's all the same kind of a system, because XP offers us the feedback right away from the technical point of view, right? And that's, I have never understood how people can try and use Scrum without XP. I mean, it's not done, right? I don't get it.
Okay, just for clarification, Donnie asked a question in the chat. How well does XP fit into the topics you presented today? That's just for our listening and viewing audience at a later date, because the session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So, Danny, next time, you could come off mute and ask your question.
Oh, okay, sure.
Thank you so much for that question. And for those who may not know, XP, Danny put in the chat again, is abbreviation for Extreme Programming. Do we have any more questions? We have a few more minutes to go. If we don't, can I invite you to come on camera, show your beautiful faces, beautiful and handsome faces for us to take our photo to post on social media, just to say that you were actually here today. And also note, just a bit of housekeeping again that I forgot earlier. Next month will be our final session for this year. We're taking November and December as a break period to do some retrospective and planning for 2025. We will also, we're on the lookout for speakers for 2025. So if you're a speaker or if you know someone who will be an excellent speaker for our community of practice, please reach out so that we could get them the speaker application form. So if no one else wants to come on camera, I will take our photo. I normally take two just in case the first one doesn't look great. Give me one more second. And also I did post the SEU link in the chat. I also posted the link for the BAPMC Meetup, the LinkedIn page, and also my LinkedIn page. Smile again. And we have one more thing before we leave. I will share my screen in 1 second. Please connect with us on social media so that you can stay informed about what's happening in the community, and also to let us know how we could be of assistance to you. So before we leave, Miss Johanna just wanted to share with you this certificate of appreciation because we thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. We really appreciate the fact that you reached out to us to let us know that you wanted to be a speaker at our community of practice. And we will share the certificate with you on LinkedIn so that you can share it with your network and your community. And we're just so appreciative of the knowledge that you shared for us. It was intense, so I'm glad it was recorded so I can go back and review it and take better notes, because you really shared a lot of valuable information from your experience, and it's really appreciated. So I thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So does anyone want to make any closing comments before we leave about your experience this evening?
Excellent speaker. Nice choice.
Thank you, Danny.
No conflict of interest, I'm sure.
I just wanted to quickly share some thoughts. This is not my first event with Johanna. I typically try to find time to listen to her. She is many times she's to the point, and she gives some analogies which make sense, specifically about flow metrics. So I really appreciate her. Thank you, Johanna.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you too. And where are you joining us
Sorry.
from?
Okay.
I'm joining from Cincinnati, Ohio. This is my first meetup with this group.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Hope you come again. Go ahead, Alberto.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to I call her our mama in the Agile world. She's among those that actually built me. I attended a lot of our sessions, One thing that is remaining is for her to talk to my community in the African way. So hopefully I will make that happen. At least this year is not still gone. Look for somewhere she will find a space to talk to our community and let us also learn one or two things from her wealth of knowledge. Thank you, ma'am. We are grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would love to speak with your community. Yeah.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Yes, and thank you all so much for joining us. Just remember that we have our next session for October posted on our Meetup page. It's open for registration. As always, our community of practice is free, so registration is required, but there's no charge to be a part of this community of practice, and we're trying our endeavor best to keep it free. So we seek speakers like Miss Johanna, who is willing to provide her expertise free of charge, and we are sincerely grateful for it. Sharing knowledge is very important, and you have done it in expert style with, as much grace and vigor that you have, and we really appreciate you being here. You are excellent.
Well, thank you very much.
So if we have no further questions, we can adjourn our meeting for today. And I look forward to welcoming you all to our last session of the year on October 30th. We did have a slight adjustment. The speaker was unavailable for the last Thursday in the month. We made a slight switch to the Wednesday, the 30th of October. So that's a slight change, but we didn't want to cancel the event. And he was very gracious to still want to be a part of our community of practice and serve as a speaker, even though he had a scheduling conflict. So we accommodated him. We met him halfway, and we just changed the event from the 31st. So it's now October 30th. So make sure, check your calendars, make sure that you're available, and register early so you can be prompted with a reminder that the meetup would be happening. And the day before, I think Meetup gives you a prompt as a little reminder, and we'll also do that as well. So take care, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your evening. For those of you who are in the path of the hurricane, please stay safe. We don't want any casualties. Take all the necessary precautions, and we will see you all again next month. New date, different date, but same time. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Stay safe. Have a wonderful day.